Hello there. And also, bro, can you stop leaving my key, please? Stop leaving the damn dungeon, dude! What is even happening? We need a penalty system for Mythic Plus, and it's about time. Not everyone agrees, it seems, and I'm not sure who is right. Is the player that has over 4 to 6 hours time per day to do keys right for leaving time-wasting runs? Is it fair for someone who can only do 2 keys per day, researched, studied, played correctly, to have someone come in, fail, leave, and force that person to re-level his or her key, assuming they will have to go through group forming again? Who is right here? Where do we even go from here? We already have penalty systems in the game, by the way. As ambitious and wishful thinking this may be, we really hope to raise some awareness with this topic, and maybe it gets to the ears of the WoW team at Blizzard. I am really curious to know what the community thinks about this outside of those who replied to our poll we made a few days ago. When it comes to penalizing people for misbehaving, the opinions are vast and range from "Nah bro, get good and go again, why you cry, be better, it's your fault," which, damn, little brother never failed a key I guess, all the way to
"My name is Inigo Montoya, you kill my
dungeon run.
Prepare to die."
Jesus Christ. Alright, listen, I shall be the arbiter of justice in this debate. No, not that kind of arbiter. Marcelian and I discussed this at length over Romanian Tsuika and Slanina and decided on what the solution should be. We need a penalty system. And before you tell us it's wrong without hearing it out, let me clarify what it is and why we need a penalty system to begin with, and also why the levers are not wrong. And all we ask is, after you watch however much of the video you like, if you like it, thumbs it up and hit that sub button. It helps out since we are dying to make more non-tier list videos. Thanks for the support. There already is a penalty system in the game for leaving queued up groups, which is the Deserter debuff. That on its own would be better than nothing, but Mythic Plus is not a queued content. You can legit decide what people you have in your group, in theory, and people need to understand this aspect in order to be able to talk about penalties. First, you need to understand who the group is, or who the bad player you are inviting into the group is. You most of the time don't know. It's impossible to know, really, without knowing that player personally. You could be inviting a Giga Chad into your group that hasn't played in 2 seasons but used to be top 1%. Or you could be inviting a 3KIO player that got there with his friends that played meta specs which didn't need him to interrupt or use defensives on every mechanic because the group was being carried by their specs, and once he or she ended up in an average group, the same strategy that was negated by having a dwarf that can dispel bleeds will wipe, since stone form is not an ability an orc knows. So although using metrics like dungeon score, item level, or keys cleared is better than nothing to try and, judge the potential of skill of someone you invite, it's not 100% foolproof. Second, that player could be you. You might have played in a previous key, week, or season with a set of players that, unbeknownst to you, handled a lot of shit that might have been your responsibility without ever saying anything back. So you just thought, oh, I can totally do this, and join the random group of people that would normally expect you to use defensives on rotation or pump more healing, because not everyone is a mage or a paladin with infinite survivability. In LFR, arenas, battlegrounds, heroic dungeons, and other formed of instance content you queue for, you don't really have that much control over who ends up in your group, and people run that content with the assumption that everyone involved is looking to accomplish the same goal that needs everyone present to carry their own weight and play in a cooperative manner. Leaving that group essentially makes it difficult, if not impossible, for the people left to continue towards their objective, and it is generally considered unsportsmanlike, something that, regardless of what you think, it is important to have, even in a video game, so long as cooperation play is assumed or implied. Some people believe a penalty isn't needed. I have been a person to leave a group as well. Not recently, so cannot really show footage of it, but have been in groups that consistently struggled to complete an encounter, let alone time the dungeon. The dungeon was doomed, but that was secondary to people not even being able to kill the boss. That happens. It's normal for upscaling content because you are supposed to hit a wall. I left keys when I was salty as well, which I'm not proud of. I'm only human, but I should have been penalized. Or should I have been? This is where the line is hard to be drawn, and I do believe it's fundamentally not the player's fault for leaving, but a penalty system has to exist. It's either Blizzard who is wrong for making the content something people have to leave or they waste time, or the player's fault for wasting the time of the people involved who signed up to do a dungeon. Both sides need to assume some level of agency over the issue. Blizzard and the devs are indirectly hurt by leavers because that eventually creates bad blood, negative vibes, and people stopping playing the game. Or worse, dorks like us that make public statements over the bad design of the content, which inevitably creates bad PR. But the player currently has no responsibility over the deliberate dismantling of the run, which doesn't keep the scales balanced on all sides. A poster on the forum said something really interesting. Community created problem needs community solution. I think League of Legends at one point had an inverse report system where you praise players in your team for their contribution, which ended up in a social score for that person translated into rewards. This sounds dangerously close to social credit, a big no-no, but if you really think about it, every person in your life has a social score you keep track of. Maybe it's not quantified into an actual number, but when a friend declines to help you out with a favor after you extended your generosity to that person, you likely remember that person and be less available next time you are needed. Negative social score is toxic, but positive one promotes good play. But in the end, it's still a system that denigrates the human experience to a number, which is a no-no for us. But there has to be consequences for disrupting team play, just like how those other types of content in the game already have. Once you are in a 5-man group within an M+ run, the sidebar menu should have two new options. One would be a surrender type option where people vote if the key is failed, and if the vote passes, everyone can leave the dungeon with no actual penalty. That is only fair. It exists in other team games. League of Legends is yet another example. If the vote doesn't pass and you leave anyway, you get a deserter type buff or debuff. Now there could be two types of debuffs. One we already have, which prevents you from joining another group of people for a set amount of time. I think it's 30 minutes. And one we had and maybe still have in games like Heroes of the Storm. The 30 minutes penalty is debatable. A dungeon run lasts around about as much, but forming the group can also last a long time, anywhere from 5 minutes to 45 minutes. Now, leaving a dungeon that took 5 minutes to make, wasted the 30 minutes of the run, and then the 30 plus 5 more minutes it takes to re-level the key back to where it was, constitutes about an hour and 10 minutes of actual time waste at the least. And this affects the key owner, who suffers the most out of everyone there. Someone said that the leaver's time is wasted as well. Not at the same level without a penalty system is not. The leaver can just quickly hop into another key of the same level without needing to level another key, assuming the queue times for everyone involved is relatively similar. But that's not true. Most of the time, healers and tanks leave, which are the ones quickest to find new groups, leaving the DPS players with a fat lip. 30 minutes penalty is not sufficient for this. I believe a good starting point is an hour, but that can still be debated. The stakes of failing an M+ dungeon are maybe similar to losing PvP rating, which is the closest they can be. Maybe the rating is worse. But the stakes are higher with no debate than any heroic dungeon or LFR group that slap you with a deserter debuff if you leave. The other type of penalty is a status effect that tells everyone you are a leaver for a long period of time, a day or a week. You can still join groups, but everyone will know you suck. Or you can only join groups with other people that suck. Now, either type of penalty we get has to come with the voting system as well, because sometimes leaving is very justified. Because the stakes are so high, like I mentioned, finishing a run that is failed yields very few rewards, something that has been partially addressed in 1107, where we get more crests for failed runs than before. It helps for sure, and I would be super interested in two things. One, how many of you guys have had keys you wanted to leave but decided to stay because it's not too bad, I still get decent crests and maybe a good item? And two, what the actual stats are for finished but untimed keys versus before this change was added. Not sure if those stats exist, but would be cool to know. Sometimes you want to push a +10 key, let's call it a Cinderbrew meadery. Now you've done your homework here. You know there's a cast you need to kick, circles you need to stay out of, and not to pull Chewie with a pack that needs crowd controls. All in the first pool of the dungeon. You know the damage intake is high, have potions, enchants, and cooldowns ready. But the tank pulls 3 packs with Chewie, and the mage doesn't bloodlust to hopefully salvage the situation, and the healer instantly dies to one of the circles on the floor they were inside of, which got them stunned. I mean, this is a 10. The mechanics are brutal this early in the season. People clearly haven't done their homework. What chances does the rest of the dungeon have when it only gets harder from here? At this point, it actually is rude to be this unprepared for the run. The problem with these scenarios is that M+ is different from other type of content. Maybe comes close to heroic and mythic raiding. It's just not the type of content you can jump into with no experience or research, and a lot of people lack both, either because they cannot be asked or were carried enough where they didn't need to learn any of that stuff. And this all comes as a package deal with the relatively low barrier of entry of Mythic Plus, where anybody can go into a dungeon, as opposed to a Mythic raid or a heroic raid. If we put a penalty system, then the 1 or 2 players that did prepare properly are stuck in a jail called "this key is either not going to be finished, let alone timed, or we have to be here for more than an hour for one item, one shittier item, and fewer crests with no IO score." Players who judge these levers for being jerks are privileged enough to not have had their efforts disrespected and ignored. While the other side of the coin, there are levers who leave because one kick was not done perfectly and they died, while the pack was killed slightly slower than ideal. Those players are privileged enough to have played with competent groups that blasted through keys and assume that just timing it is not sufficient for their time. Either way, there is no one side that is 100% right all of the time, and right now the side leaving has close to no consequences for their action, while the other just has to take it on the chin. It's just not balanced. We shouldn't perma-ban leavers, reposition their cars, and remarry their daughters into political relationships so to pay off their debts. But failing to see the other side of the coin is what creates the real toxicity in the game. Because let's not forget, we are all human here. Everyone fucks up. Zero tolerance is not good. Infinite tolerance is not good either. And if you want to know what goes around in the mind of your healer trying to keep your butt alive in a high key, check out Marcelian's video on healing a 10 Theater of Pain on Discipline Priest, a key we did the first week of the season, by the way, so you know the spices are on the menu.